Welcome to episode 131 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Lost Guy. It's March 11, 2005, and today's story is about one of the best referees in the world deciding that football was no longer worth the risk. Because on this day, Anders Frisk, Swedish, elite, multilingual, experienced, trusted with finals and semi-finals at the very top of the game, announced that he was retiring with immediate effect. Not because his legs had gone, not because age had caught him, not because FIFA or UEFA had pushed him aside, but because threats had followed him home, because his family had been pulled into it, because the ecosystem around one of Europe's biggest club matches had turned so poisonous that one of its most respected officials decided the whistle was no longer worth carrying. And that is what makes this more than a controversy story. This is not just about a red card or a town conversation or Jose Mourinho being Jose Mourinho. It's about what happens when pressure becomes theater. Theater becomes accusation. Accusation becomes hysteria. And hysteria lands on a referee's doorstep. So today we'll do what OTD always tries to do. We'll go back to Anders Frisk before the scandal, how he rose through Swedish football, why he was trusted, and why this was not some marginal official having one bad night. Then we'll trace Chelsea and Barcelona into collision in the Champions League, the first leg at Camp Nou, the decisions that exploded, and the accusations that followed. And then we'll get to the point where the story stops being sporting and becomes human. Because if you want to understand how football talks about protecting referees now, you have to start with the day one top referee decided football had not protected him at all. But how did we get here? Anders Frisk began refereeing in 1978. He reached the Swedish top flight in 89 and received his FIFA badge in 91. And from there, the climb was fast because the reputation was real. This was not a referee who drifted upward on availability. This was a referee UEFA and FIFA kept putting on bigger and bigger stages. His first international was Iceland against Turkey in July 1991. He handled youth tournaments. He worked Euro 96. He missed the 98 World Cup through injury, then came back to referee the 1999 Confederations Cup final between Brazil and Mexico in the Azteca. Then came the appointment that tells you exactly how highly he was rated. The UEFA Euro 2000 final, France against Italy in Rotterdam. That is the kind of match you give to a referee you trust completely. And Frisk kept going. He handled matches at the 2002 World Cup. He worked Euro 2004, including the semi-final between Portugal and the Netherlands, and served as a fourth official in the final. And by the time we reach early 2005, he is not merely part of the elite list. He's one of the names. And the public image of Frisk is interesting. He was visible, stylish, composed, calm, slightly glamorous by referee standards. He was even recognizable beyond pure officiating circles in a way most referees never are. But underneath that image was a serious resume, major tournaments, major club nights, and 118 internationals across an 18-year top-level career. There had been danger before. In Sweden in 1995, he was attacked by a spectator who ran onto the pitch. In September 2004, during Roma against Dynamo Kiev in the Champions League, he was struck by an object thrown from the crowd, left bleeding, and had to abandon the match. So there's a dark undertone here. The sport already knew, before March 2005, that officials were vulnerable. It already had evidence. It just had not learned enough from it. Then enter the clubs. Chelsea under Mourinho were new money, new power, new swagger. Abramovich's club had become a machine very quickly, and Mourinho had arrived in England from Porto carrying victory, certainty, and an absolute conviction that every edge mattered. Barcelona, under Frank Rijkaard, were becoming something else, more fluid, more stylish, less combative in tone, but no less ambitious. Ronaldinho was the smile of the team, but this was also a serious European project. Both clubs topped their Champions League groups to reach the knockout phase. Chelsea came through a section with Porto, Paris Saint-Germain, and CSKA Moscow. Barcelona came through a heavyweight group with Milan, Shakhtar Donetsk, and Celtic. So when they met in the last 16, this did not feel like an ordinary round of 16 tie. It felt like a collision between rising powers, between two managers building identities, and between two clubs convinced they belonged on the throne. And here's the key context. Mourinho did not really do neutral. He did not merely coach matches. He framed them. He shaped the emotional weather around them. That could be brilliant because it sharpened his team. But it could also be incendiary because once you imply injustice, you create a crowd ready to see conspiracy everywhere. So we get to Camp Nou on February 23rd, 2005. Chelsea take the lead through an own goal by Juliano Belletti and go in front in the tie. Barcelona are angry about that goal, and Chelsea are pleased with the position. And then the match turns. Didier Drogba is sent off after 2 yellow cards. That is the flashpoint everyone remembers. From Chelsea's perspective, this dismissal changes the night. From Barcelona's perspective, Drogba had been reckless enough to invite trouble. From Frisk's perspective, it is simply a disciplinary decision in a match that is heating up. Then Barcelona come back. Maxi Lopez equalizes, and Samuel Eto'o gives them the 2-1 win. And suddenly, the scoreline is almost secondary because the post-match story is moving somewhere else. At halftime, Frank Rijkaard had approached Frisk in the tunnel era. That much is not really in doubt. The argument is over what the contact meant. Mourinho and Chelsea treated it as improper influence. Rijkaard said it was polite and limited. UEFA's initial line, based on Frisk's report and witnesses present, was that nothing objectionable had taken place and that Rijkaard had essentially greeted him and apologized for not doing so before the game. But once Mourinho went public, the story escaped the match. Chelsea refused the usual post-match media obligations. Mourinho alleged that Rijkaard had gone into Frisk's dressing room. The implication was clear, even when not fully spelled out, that the referee had been influenced and that what followed, especially Drogba's red card, could not be separated from that contact. And this is where the infrastructure begins to fail. Because elite football had regulations, it had observers, reports, and disciplinary pathways. What it did not yet have was a serious modern understanding of how quickly an accusation from a famous manager could travel, mutate, and attach itself to a referee as a person. Frisk's report denied that anything improper had happened. UEFA publicly backed that account. A later UEFA report would confirm that Rijkaard did approach Frisk, but said the referee sent him away and that there was no evidence of an illicit dressing room meeting or of influence over the match. So in procedural terms, Frisk was not hung out to dry. UEFA did defend the report. It did pursue Chelsea. Mourinho was later banned for 2 matches from the touchline, fined, and Chelsea was fined as well. But here's the problem. Procedure is not protection. Because while the disciplinary machine was slowly turning, the threats were arriving. Telephone, email, post, and according to Frisk himself, his family was threatened too. That is the part of the story that matters most. A referee can survive criticism, a referee can survive a bad headline, and a referee can survive stadium hostility. But what Frisk could not reasonably be expected to accept was the fear that the consequences were now sitting in his private life. He said the previous couple of weeks had been unlike anything he had experienced. He said it was not worth continuing. He said the safety of his family had to come first. One report has him saying he no longer even knew whether he dared let his children go to the post office. That is not football pressure. That is personal fear. And that is why this episode should not be told as the Frisk controversy. No, it should be told as the moment football lost one of its best referees because the people around the game could not keep the temperature within the bounds of civilization. So what changed? Well, it exposed how fragile referee authority really was. For all the symbolism of the whistle, the cards, the FIFA badge, and the big match appointments, Frisk's case showed that a referee could still be left frighteningly alone once the public storm began. It sharpened the conversation around responsibility. Players can rage in a moment, and fans can behave appallingly, but managers speak with amplification. And when a star manager suggests dark forces are at work, he does not merely describe the atmosphere, he manufactures it. UEFA eventually sanctioned Mourinho and Chelsea over the affair, but UEFA also stopped short of formally blaming him for Frisk's retirement itself. That left a grey zone. Punished, yes. Held fully accountable for the human consequences? No. It became part of a wider push, not a single direct line, but part of the pressure to help football start talking more seriously about respect, dissent, abuse, and the conditions in which referees work. In the years after, governing bodies leaned harder into respect campaigns, stricter messaging on abuse of officials, and more formal behavioral frameworks. The FA's Respect program began in 2008. UEFA's Respect initiative followed the same year. Communication systems for referees and assistants were tested at high level in 2006 and later became standard. VAR would arrive much later for decision support, not personal safety, but it also belongs to the same broad historical arc, a sport slowly admitting that referees cannot be left to absorb every high-stakes error narrative on their own. But we should be careful. Football did not solve this because of Anders Frisk. Football still has not solved it. Referees at elite and grassroots levels are still abused. Threats still happen. Online harassment has only made parts of this worse. So the legacy here is not a neat reform story. It is much more uncomfortable than that. Frisk received the FIFA Presidential Award later in 2005. The wording matters. It was recognition for a career cut short after abuse and threats. That was football's way of saying, we know what we lost. But awards after the fact are not the same as safety in the moment. A tribute is not a shield. A speech is not protection. There's one more layer to this. Frisk was not some abstract official in a scandal archive. He was a human being who loved the profession. One report even notes that he had described himself as a Chelsea fan as a boy. That makes the whole thing uglier, not softer, because it reminds you that the people in the middle are not symbols. They are people with histories, loyalties, families, and limits. So before we go, 3 things to take away from March 11, 2005. First, Anders Frisk did not retire because football was emotional. He retired because football became threatening. That is a different category entirely. Second, when managers speak about referees after major matches, they're not just explaining a result. They're shaping the conditions in which referees must live afterwards. And third, referee protection is not just about better laws, better technology, or better disciplinary codes. It's about culture. Players, coaches, clubs, broadcasters, governing bodies, and fans either cool the temperature or raise it. On this day in 2005, Anders Frisk announced his immediate retirement from refereeing after threats against himself and his family in the aftermath of Barcelona against Chelsea, and one of the world's best officials walked away because football had built the spectacle, but not the safety, around the man in the middle. That's all for episode 131 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Lost Guy. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the show, leave a rating, and share it with a fellow football historian. Tomorrow, we go to March 12, 1900, Arsenal against Loughborough, a 12-0 demolition that still stands as the club's record league win and the strange symmetry that links it to the club on the other side of Arsenal's heaviest league defeat. See you tomorrow.